Hey folks, this week's for the point-and-click fans in the audience, since I'll be taking a crack at developer made from strings Murder on Space Station 52, thanks to a review copy from gamescritics.com. Which, by the way, has been neat to dive into since I've already touched on this developer's bodies of works once before, with their title Moonrise Fall. That said, these two games are very different beasts, both execution-wise and tonally, which begs the question, did Murder on Space Station 52 slay, or would I have preferred to leave this case unsolved? I'm your host Arlian, let's find out together. Edward Locke was only meant to be a replacement, just another engineer tasked with slowing Space Station 52's gradual descent into disrepair. Unfortunately, what he found was more than just a hub long past its glory days. No, what Locke found was his predecessor, long dead and with a key piercing his head. Yet as shocking as this morbid crime may be, the rest of the crew seems disinclined to investigate further, sweeping it under the rug as an unfortunate accident. Murky reasoning that begets all sorts of questions in and of itself, a line of inquiry Locke can't help but find himself pursuing, even if it might lead him to following in his predecessor's footsteps. And as far as premises go, it's certainly interesting, but what really snared me here was just how gleefully it veers straight into telling a noir-style story.
My father always said the truth is a moving target. I never knew what he meant by that, but I'm beginning to understand.
Watching Locke slip into the role of hard-boiled detective armed with little more than sardonic wit and persistence, delving into a case that everyone seems to know more about than they're letting on, it's a fun ride, and it does a decent job of keeping the player guessing, both in regards to the motive behind the crime, those behind it, and whether or not it was part of something bigger. At least until the latter half of the game. By that point, I'd already gotten a decent idea of who was behind everything, in large part due to the clue/suspect board the game provides you, reducing the tension by a fair bit. And technically, this was helpful, since there does come a point where you need to solve who the suspect is. Only the choice doesn't really matter. Sure, you can build up a body count by chasing all the wrong leads, but it doesn't really change the outcome of things one way or the other beyond that one scene, which was a bit of a letdown as far as climatic conclusions go. What's more, while the climax itself is fine, I still found it less gripping than the journey there, because while there are certainly story elements that are foreshadowed throughout the narrative, they aren't necessarily central to the mystery, but rather to Locke. And while it makes for an interesting development near the end of the game, and one that's decently foreshadowed, the actual mystery of Space Station 52 didn't feel quite as central. Still, I really can't help but speak fondly of Murder on Space Station 52's story, because even though the ending does feel a bit abrupt, at the end of the day, it's well written and really manages to harness that pulpy feel that is complementary to the noir story, managing a fine balance between building ambience with well-crafted prose and releasing tension with a few well-timed jokes.
I tried to get a reservation at the library, but they were all booked up. Ha ha, ha ha.
As for the gameplay, well, Space Station 52 is definitely one of the more challenging point-and-click adventures I've played. See, while the game does ease you into things with the nigh requisite bits of item collection and combinations, it's fairly kind on this front, since there's a hotspot indicator that helps to avert the whole blindly fumbling around thing. Rather, the bulk of the game's difficulty stems from the more involved bits of problem solving, some of which comes in the form of item segments with more contextual elements you'll need to fiddle with, but most of which is nestled at the heart of the novel conundrums you'll encounter. There's quite a few of the latter, really, a veritable buffet of brain teasers, in fact. There is just one small hiccup here for me, and it's that I came away feeling like the biggest challenge of a handful of these puzzles was the simple act of ascertaining the rules which govern them. Odd statement, I know, but a number of the later puzzles thrive off a certain sense of uncertainty, which, when paired with a lack of a hint system, can make figuring out the core logic of some of these a bit of a doozy. To the point that I ultimately found it a lot more expeditious to simply brute force a few of the puzzles, if only because I'd managed to collect every hint in the area I could, and the outcome was still a horrific paint document I couldn't make heads or tails of. It simply failed to click every so often, which dragged out my playtime a substantial bit and led to a certain sense of relief when I reached the end of the game. But yeah, that sums up the gameplay neatly enough, so let's talk aesthetic and how this game oozes it. On the visual side of things, I largely found it to be quite good. The environments are nice to look at, and even without the hotspot indicator, the game's pretty good at signaling what's interactable or investigatable at a glance. That said, it does occasionally stumble, if only because the game struggles with its own screen locking in inconvenient ways, and preventing you from panning the screen around to check a corner or locking in at an angle even while you're moving around. While you can shake it loose, so to speak, it does make exploring or examining certain rooms a bit of a hassle. Still, I do appreciate the game's style as a whole. It does have a very interesting approach to its design that made it memorable. But yeah, that's the visuals, which means audio time, and I am a fan, plain and simple. There's a nice soundtrack to help set that melancholic and mysterious vibe, and more importantly, there's voice acting to really help sell all the detective-y monologues. And, well, the rest of the banter. Admittedly, not all of the voice work necessarily hits home, but the main character is perfect, and that's what really sold it for me. But yeah, that's Space Station 52, so let's boil things down for the conclusion, and I largely enjoyed myself. On the narrative side of things, I was rather fond of the central plot and the characters, even if the associated investigatory elements and the climax felt a bit lacking. That said, if there was going to be anything contentious about this review, it'd be the gameplay. And, well, yeah, it can get a bit dicey if you struggle with problem solving given the lack of hints and how obscure some of the solutions can feel. That being said, if you're a fan of puzzles, this game provides them in spades, and with enough variety that the more simplistic point-and-click elements feel less like a hurdle and more like a tool to progress the story and a means of easing the tension caused by its other challenges. In short, I do think I can recommend Murder on Space Station 52, but by that same token, it's to a smaller niche of people. Those who won't be dissuaded despite the lack of hints or the way that certain solutions are more opaque. As far as general accessibility goes, it is a bit of a fumble, yes, but if you can get past that, the experience does feel worthwhile. And I really do have to give it credit for capturing that noir vibe. It was enough to get me on a book kick for a whole week afterwards. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you have something to say, leave a comment. If you enjoy my efforts to create new indie reviews and interviews, hit subscribe and the bell. For a link to my Discord, the Crit Hit Cauldron, check the description. And check out my Patreon to see reviews early and support the channel, like Green Witch Babby and Andy noted. I also have a merch house with neat swag like Crit Hit coffee mugs and shirts. Depending on if people leave in the comments that they want to see an updated shirt, I do have a new segment that has Yzma on it. Very cute. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.